This is Firecrackers. You've missed quite a bit, but don't worry, you can catch up with us on our Facebook page. We stream live on Facebook. And now we're about to discuss way out of the persistent flooding. And from the visuals that you could see earlier, it is no joke. This is very serious. And I have so much compassion for people who are living in that area. But now we are joined by Yinka Oloninirom, who is joining us live from Lagos. He is an environmental professional and also a journalist. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us today on Firecrackers.
Good evening. It's good to be here again.
All right, yeah, thank you so much for staying with us. So let us first begin with this issue of persistent flooding. Some have blamed climate change for the persistent flooding. Some are blaming human factor because of indiscriminate dumping of refuse. Even some are even blaming the government for not properly planning this state. But from your own angle, who would you blame for this persistent flooding that we're having in Nigeria?
Okay, firstly, we need to even talk about the cause of flooding. Flooding, as we know now, is natural. And by natural is a product of accumulated geographical processes. So, on one hand, anthropogenic activities have been blamed for rising temperature. Anthropogenic activities, I mean the industrial activities, the pollution, those things that have caused the earth to warm up. And as a result of that, the ice caps are melting. And when they are melting, what happens? There is more water to flow around. So when you have the icebergs melting, people talk about the Antarctica melting. What is happening is that water is coming, and it's coming, and there's really a little to what we can do. So at that point, it is natural. And when we talk about preventing flooding, all hands must be on deck. Like the people have a role to play, the government have a role to play, environmentalists have roles to play. So all hands must be on deck if we must tackle the issue of flooding. But fundamentally, in Nigeria specifically, what we have observed is that as much as Nigeria contributes little to the problem of climate change, the devastating effect is greater on Nigeria. It's an irony, but not only Nigeria, that's where we find ourselves, even in Africa. So what we must do is, as much as we on individual level, we can make efforts, however little it is accumulated. It can sum up into something big. We can make effort on an individual level by doing what? Stop dumping refuse on drainage channels, not building close to drainage channels or on drainage channels, avoiding wetlands. Those are the essence of this is that on one hand, refuse dump in drainage channels, they clog, they block the drains, and water has nowhere to pass. And what does it have to do? It flows into the houses, flows to where people are. On the other hand, is that when people don't also build close to drainage channels, the devastating effect of flooding not get to them. I remember that when I was serving in Jigawa as a corps member, there was a flooding that took place, and what they told us as corps members was that we should move uplands. At least there were regions that were highlands and there were regions that were lowlands. So the lowlands were, in fact, devastated, just like what you have now in the Borno, Maiduguri. Unfortunately, in our north, we still have a number of houses built with mud. Yes, and you can imagine what happens when flood comes to that kind of area. You wash it everything away as if it's washing sand. So people are thrown into agony, into pains, and into hardship. So basically, when we're talking about tackling flooding, all hands must be on deck, and it is not enough to point blame games, because what is coming for us is a natural disaster, and the earlier the better when we come together to tackle it.
Be on deck. But if we look at it from this perspective of people versus the government, we need the government to make these policies to ensure that the environment is safe, and even people need these policies, because if you don't criminalize something, if you don't tell people that, okay, what you are doing is wrong, they don't see it as wrong, they just see it as, okay, I've done it, I've been able to get away with it, and then that's fine. So on the part of the government, what laws would you like that they should enact that you feel like if this is done, then we could reduce the effects of flooding?
Okay, funny enough, there are laws, and you'll be surprised and that's why it is funny that when people are charged in courts, you discover that some people are not even ignorant. They say it's not an excuse. There are laws already. There are laws of the land, and you'll be surprised that some of these laws even date as far back as 1970. In fact, since the time of the when environmental discussion became prominent in Nigeria, when when some Italian came to dump some refuse on Nigerian soil. So there have been laws. There are international conventions and conferences. There are also international laws that Nigeria is a part to. So what is important rather is the implementation and enforcement of those laws. And that's why you see that every now and then Lagos state government is trying. They are going all out to enforce environmental laws. And when they find out that you dump refuse somewhere, the person is apprehended and is charged with the appropriate laws. So there are laws. What is needed is the implementation and enforcement. It's also important that many states in Nigeria need to wake up, like maybe taking or following the model that Lagos is laying. So when they all come together and implement some of these laws, people will be aware. Now it's not only enough to implement those laws. There's also the place of education, sensitization. People need to be aware. But in a number of researches that we have been able to carry out as environmentalists, we found out that ignorance was really a problem. And people, like we always say, people cannot develop beyond their level of education. So people also need to know, because what about the areas where the government enforcement does not reach? I mean, the rural areas, the communities. So what you can do for them is to do what? Take campaigns to those areas. And that is where not only government is responsible for this, even organizations, corporate bodies can also join government in this sensitization. People must learn. They must know what they must do at their individual level, what they must avoid in order to curb the issue of flooding.
What are your thoughts about the action of people regarding flooding and even climate change in Nigeria?
The major problem, you see, ignorance is a very terrible disease in this country. Some Nigerians, they are ignorant of the existence of rules, regulations, and laws. There are thousands of environmental laws in this country, which some persons are ignorant of. And those educated ones who are aware of it, they keep quiet without making the ignorant ones to be aware of sin. Then aside from that, government needs to create awareness of the existence of those laws, the rules and regulations. Government needs to let them be aware of sin. There is no state in this country that does not have a state law in terms of environmental issues. All of them have it. But you see, then when it comes to building construction, there are some rules and regulations, there are some laws that need to be complied with in terms of maybe setback, drainages, and the rest. All these, when they are not complied with, will result in environmental challenges, which what happened in Borno State is not an exception. Because I read some points in respect of what happened in Maiduguri. I learned that some months ago, signal had been given that such thing will happen in that state. And as such, there is a dam in that state, which ought to be properly guided to avoid being overflowed to the community, which I think government sent some officials, I think they call them high power delegation, to visit the place. But the report of the high power delegation was not too okay for government to take action. So despite that, the water was overflowing, and at the end of the thing went to the other side. And in that regard, the present experience in that state came into being. So I would want to say that with due respect to the government, that people you call high power delegation, are they environmentalists? Are they town planners? Are they architects? Are they surveyors? Are they lawyers? Are they sociologists? Are they geographers? If they are not high power delegation. They are low power delegation. And from what I read, I discovered that the problem that happened in Maiduguri happened as a poor report of that so-called high power delegation. Because I learned that high power delegation said there is no cause for alarm, which made the government to keep quiet. But if signal had been given or report had been given to the government that set up that high power delegation, I say, Your Excellency, there is imminent danger in so area. Government might have taken some steps to cover it. But when the reverse was the case, and the result now came out, it resulted in a loss of life, goods and services, property, and the rest. So I think government should make the so-called high power delegation, not only in respect of Borno State, but in all states of the Federation, including federal government. Now, when you are constituting the so-called high power delegation, whether at the local government, the ward level, state or federal, and the rest, involve persons who are well trained in that field. Don't appoint your political stooges, your political puppets. Don't put them there. They know nothing about it. It's like somebody who went to appoint a hunter to be a member of a high power delegation in respect of environmental challenges. My God. What would he write? When you want to appoint them, involve people in academics, involve people, engineers, involve surveyors, architects, lawyers, town planners. When it comes to environmental challenges, this set of people, if one is not perfect, the other will be perfect. Then they will be able to cross-fertilize idea and give the government a comprehensive guide, rather than you put your girlfriend there, you put your boyfriend there, you put your uncle, your in-law, your son, your daughter. You pay them millions to go and carry out a finding, and at the end of the day, they didn't want to disappoint you. They give you a favorable finding, then you keep quiet. You pump millions of naira to them. They slept in the hotel for several days or weeks, enjoying themselves. Now see what has happened in that state. That thing, what happened now, will cost the federal government, the state government, the local government, billions of naira, and some lives that have been lost cannot be. They can't come back to this life again. So where are we? What high power? I call that power. I say the delegation is no low power. They were powerless. So let the power delegation be powerful people, intelligent ones, people who are good in research, people who are good in finance, people who are patient, who can spend time with a view to know the truth of what is happening, not the hurry people, not the yahoo set of investigators. Those ones will not help this country and will not do us any good. That is just my advice to the government. Then to the family of the persons who involved in such I commiserate with them. I pray that the Almighty God will definitely come to your rescue, and needful will be done by government. I appeal to government to also swing into action and ensure that those families are pacified in terms of accommodation, in terms of work, in terms of education, because some children will be out of school now because of this incident. Some will be homeless. The government should do something about that. And then the pastors, the imams, and the other persons in the other side of the religion, the prayers you are praying, you continue to be praying every day. We don't want problem in Nigeria. We want peace in Nigeria. We don't want disaster. Keep on praying, but let us see the effect of all these prayers. Let us see the effect of this.
How could that be measured?
Well, it's part of the area that has not been concluded in terms of research. When you talk of religion and this, that area is inconclusive, because the mode of measuring it is indefinite. So it's well, lawyer we call it ad infinitum. So I will advise that the prayer should continue. But let us feel the impact of all these prayers. The prayer is very, very important. Hallelujah. Everything.
Okay, all right. So our virtual guest, what would be your advice to the government, be it the state government and the federal government, even people living in that area? What would be your advice to them?
Government needs to continue in its enforcement of environmental laws. The people in the areas need to also be compliant with those laws by avoiding environmental infraction. The popular one that we know, dumping of refuse in drainage channels. And also builders and developers should obtain proper permits before they site projects, because when people try to bypass law, the implication is that there is in the future it's not sustainable, and so people have to suffer for these things in the future. So when people obtain proper permits, we know that there will have been an agency that would give the approval that, oh, you can build here, you cannot build here. If you build here, this is the implication. Then you avoid such sites. And also, before people buy their land and property, they must be clear about what is the plan of that area. And you need to also look out, what is there river passing around that place? All of these things have to be considered. And also for people living close in the coastal areas or along river channels, they need to also move away from those areas to the uplands, to the areas where there are no, or where there will be a limited effect of flooding. Although, the funny thing is that the kind of flooding we're experiencing these days, I'm afraid to say it will get worse. Because why? The effect of climate change has not stopped. As from 2023 has been said to be the hottest year. And you can imagine what they would say about 2024. But as we speak, scientists will tell you that this year is the coldest year. And what do they mean by coldest year? They're saying that going forward is probably going to be hotter, despite the fact that 2023 has already been said to be the hottest year. So if it's getting hotter, if policymakers have not made bold decisions to stop climate change, and the rising temperature has not been kept below 1.5 degrees Celsius, I'm afraid that we can be seeing more water. Because what is happening in Borno also is that, of course, there are dams built to contain some of those water when they flow. But what happens when the water overflows? And why is it overflowing? There's increased amount of rainfall that is falling. And from our research, the latest research we conducted from, let me use Lagos, data that we got from meteorological stations, NIMET in Lagos, we observed that rainfall over the 30 years, although it has been fluctuating, but there are still spikes. There are periods when the volume of amount of rainfall goes very high. And what happens? There's more water in the channels, more water everywhere, and then it goes on and on. There's flooding, there's disaster. So that is why, like I said earlier, all hands really need to be on deck. People need to collaborate with the government, because it's about survival of everybody. Even everybody wants to survive, even governments, officials, the citizens, the policymakers. So it's all about us. It's all about us and honesty together.
Nigeria has been handling things so far. Do you think the Nigerian government, by their action, do you think they are taking climate change as seriously as they need to? Before you even talk about the citizens, well, a lot of people believe that it is false. Even in advanced countries where you think that they should be better enlightened on these things, we still have individuals there who do not believe in climate change. So let's first have your thoughts about the action of the government towards climate change.
Yes, like what my colleague said earlier, what is important is that we need to first of all have experts in those critical sectors. If you have experts in the critical sectors, they come up with scientific facts, and this is what is happening. To a layman, really, they are experiencing increased rainfall, they are experiencing increased temperature, they are feeling more heat. In our last research, people confirmed that yes, the temperature has been increasing, even though they may not know the reason for it. So we first of all need to have people in the environmental sectors in government who must have that knowledge. They are aware of it, and when they are aware of it, they are able to pass it on. Of course, the government has organs and platforms to sensitize the people. So when they are aware of this, they can push it out to people. People can get to know. Then, of course, I would say that Nigerian government as a whole, of course, is getting there in the sense that the discussion on climate change and environmental issues is now more popular than what we used to know even 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And as you can see, we also see around, even in Lagos, we're already seeing vehicles that operate on CNGs, including commercial vehicles. This is to tell us that the discussion is now popular. So we can no longer say that, nobody's aware of the issue of climate change. And of course, we can also make people to assert that government also making effort to ensure that people people live their life in a sustainable way alongside environmental guidelines by using CNG powered vehicles, electricity vehicles. So if those things are coming more and more from governments and people who are able to embrace it, especially when some of those sorts of energy like CNG and electricity is cheaper, of course, we will all have a reason to go for those options. Whether we like it or not, whether by, how would I put it, consciously or unconsciously, we are already embracing a friendly climate. And by extension, we are contributing to reducing not only the impact of climate change, but the long-term mitigation of climate change.
Thank you so much for being part of Firecrackers. It has really been educational. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Okay, and that's being Oloniniro, who joined us live from Lagos. He's an environment professional, also a journalist. And many thanks to Dr. Yemi Omote, the legal practitioner. Thank you. It's always a joy having you here in the studio.
The viewers and the listeners at home, I thank you for sparing your time to watch the program and listen with rapt attention. I just want to say that parents who have children between the ages of, let's say, 15 and 18, and the federal government is saying there's going to be limited age to write JAM, to write this, to write that, to enter university. The government should have to think about that. Because if a child passes while at the age of 16, and the government still says it's still going to spend 2 years or 3 years before it goes to university, it will lead to a high number of crime in society. That it will lead to unwanted pregnancies. So I advise the government, have a rethink about that. Let them go to the schools. Your children benefited from that. Why do you want to tie others from enjoying it?
All right. So this is where we'll be drawing the curtains on today's episode of Firecrackers.